The calluses on my hands, a lifetime of building something from nothing, felt like Braille telling a story nobody read anymore. They just saw the finished product. The house, the cars, the goddamn empire of a fortune that felt heavier every day. 78 years old, and I was richer than it ever intended to be and lonelier than it ever feared possible. My family saw a vault. They didn't see the man who poured the foundation. It started, I suppose, with the little things. The way my daughter, Carol, would eye my antique walnut desk while talking about her husband's precarious investments. The way my grandson, Jason, would pat my shoulder and call me Pops a little too sweetly right before asking to borrow against his next big, doomed venture. My other grandson, Mark, never asked for anything. He just simmered in the corner, a storm cloud of resentment, believing the world owed him more than it had given, me included. And then there was Maya, sweet Maya, my youngest granddaughter, the only one who ever called just to ask how my arthritis was, whose visits didn't feel like a tactical reconnaissance mission, but the real kick in the teeth was my 65th birthday party. Not a milestone, but Carol had insisted on a lavish affair. We need to show our faces, Dad, she'd said, which really meant she needed to show off her father's money. I'd sat there, a king on a paper throne, surrounded by chatter that had nothing to do with me and everything to do with the ecosystem of wealth was supposedly the center of. I felt like a prize bull at the county fair, everyone assessing my weight, my health, my eventual value. That night, nursing a single malt whiskey that cost more than my first car, I had the thought. It wasn't a fully formed plan, just a dark, bitter little seed. What if I wasn't here? What if the prize bull was suddenly gone? What would they really do? The seed took root. It grew in the quiet hours, fed by every dismissive comment, every transparently greedy glance. I wasn't senile. I was sharper than most of them gave me credit for. I was just tired. Tired of the performance. Tired of being loved for all the wrong reasons. I needed to know. I had to know who saw me and who just saw the key to me. So, I decided to get kidnapped. Not for real, of course. I may be old, but am not foolish. I hired a man, a professional. His name was Leo, and he was ex-Special Forces, now working private security for the disgustingly wealthy. I found him through layers of discretion, a friend of a former business associate who'd had a nasty divorce. Leo didn't ask many questions. He listened. His eyes, a flat, neutral grey, didn't flicker when I laid out my plan. He just nodded, named his exorbitant fee, and we got to work. The plan was simple, elegant in its cruelty. Leo would snatch me during my weekly walk through the nature preserve near my estate. It was my one uncheckable routine, my 2 hours of solitude. He'd use a non-lethal tranquilizer data terrifying, but necessary touch of authenticity. He'd take me to a pre-arranged location, a soundproofed, but comfortably appointed cabin he'd secretly purchased 6 months prior under a shell corporation. It had everything we needed: a bed, a kitchen, a secure landline, and most importantly, a sophisticated audio bugging system that fed directly to a receiver in the cabin. Leo would make the ransom call. The demand would be $2 million, not enough to break the estate, but a significant, painful sum. A sum that would require liquidating assets, making choices. And I would listen. I would hear every word they said when they thought I couldn't. The morning of, I dressed carefully. Khaki trousers, a sturdy walking jacket. I felt a strange calm, a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in years. At breakfast, Carol fussed over a new china pattern for a charity gala she was chairing. Jason talked about the market. Mark scowled at his phone. Maya wasn't there. She was at university, studying marine biology. She'd sent me a text that morning. Thinking of you, Grandpa. Don't let them wear you out today. The irony was a physical ache. I set out on my walk at precisely 10 a.m. The autumn air was crisp, smelling of damp earth and decaying leaves. Sunlight dappled the path. It was a beautiful day to stage your own abduction. My heart wasn't racing. It was steady, resolute. I walked my usual route, deeper into the woods, where the trees grew thick and the path narrowed. I heard him before I saw him. A soft crunch of a twig, expertly placed, just enough to make me turn. Leo was dressed in dark, nondescript clothing. His face was partially obscured by a black ski mask. He looked every inch the terrifying professional he was. For a split second, despite knowing it was coming, primal fear lanced through me. This was real. This was happening. He didn't speak. He raised his arm. There was a soft "feff" sound. A sharp sting bloomed on my neck. I slapped a hand to it, my fingers finding the feathered end of a dart. The world immediately began to swim, the edges of my vision blurring into a swirling, nauseating vortex. The tranquilizer was fast acting. My legs turned to water. I crumpled to the leafy ground, the scent of loam filling my nostrils. The last thing I saw was Leo's impassive grey eyes above the mask, checking his watch. Then, nothing. I woke up with a groggy thick-headedness that felt like the worst hangover of my life. I was on a bed in a dimly lit room, wood-paneled walls, a single barred window showing a sliver of darkening sky. A wave of disorientation washed over me, followed swiftly by a cold clutch of panic. Where am I? Then it all rushed back. The plan, Leo. I pushed myself up on my elbows. The room was small, Spartan, but clean. A bed, a small table with a bottle of water, a door that looked solid, no windows besides the small, high one. A camera was mounted in the corner of the ceiling, its tiny red light an unwavering eye. Leo was watching. The performance had begun. I played my part. I tested the door, locked, solidly. I peered out the window. Nothing but dense pine trees. I let out a shaky breath, a genuine one, because the reality of my confinement, even self-imposed, was unnerving. I sat on the edge of the bed and put my head in my hands. I was a prisoner. Now we waited. The waiting was the hardest part. Hours bled into each other. Leo brought me food, a bland sandwich, more water. He never spoke. He just opened the door, placed the tray on the floor, unlocked it again. His silence was more terrifying than any threat could have been. It made the charade feel terrifyingly real. Then the sound began. A low, static hum, and then voices, crystal clear, emanating from a small, hidden speaker in the ceiling. It was my living room. It had the system installed years ago, a paranoid security measure, a break-in scare. They'd forgotten about it, or never known. The first voice I heard was Carol's. It was shrill, frayed with a panic that sounded entirely genuine. Just gone. His phone goes straight to voicemail. He never misses his walk. Never. A deeper, calmer voice. David, her husband. The financier. Carol, darling, calm down. He's 78. Maybe he pulled a muscle. Sat down on a log. His phone died. 6 hours. David, be serious. I've called the hospitals. I've called the club. Nothing. Then, Jason's voice, smooth, trying to be the voice of reason, but with an undercurrent of excitement. A crisis he could manage. Mom, Dad's right. Let's not jump to worst-case scenarios. He'll drive the route now. Maybe he's chatting up some bird watcher and lost track of time. He chuckled, a hollow sound. The front door slammed open. Heavy footsteps. Mark's voice, gruff and angry. What's going on? I got 10 missed calls. It's your grandfather, Carol said, her voice cracking. He's missing. A beat of silence. I could picture Mark's face, the slow processing. Missing. What does that mean? Did you check the wine cellar? Maybe he's sampling the 45 Lafite again. A crude joke. No concern. Just a cheap shot. This isn't funny, Mark. Carol snapped. Then the phone rang. The landline. A sharp, jangling sound that silenced everyone in the room. I heard the fumbling as someone, probably David, picked it up. Hello. A voice, electronically distorted, flat and menacing, filled the room. It was Leo, using a voice modulator. Listen carefully. We have Arthur Riot. A collective gasp. A sharp cry from Carol. Who is this? David demanded, his financier's voice trying to take control of the negotiation. The terms are simple. The distorted voice continued, ignoring him. $2 million. Small, unmarked bills. You will be contacted with further instructions. Do not contact the police. If you do, we will know, and we will send him back to you in pieces." The line went dead. The silence in my living room was absolute for a full 3 seconds. Then it erupted. Carol was sobbing, great, heaving sobs. "Oh my God, David. 2 million. We have to get it. We have to. 2 million liquid." David's voice was calculating, already working the problem. That's not just sitting around, Carol. That's tied up. The portfolio liquidating that quickly would take a massive hit. "I don't care about the hit," she screamed. "It's my father. Mom, listen to Dad." Jason cut in, his voice urgent. "Hayes right. We can't just panic sell. We need to think. This is a negotiation. They start high. We can talk them down. 1 million. Maybe even less." My blood ran cold. Talk them down. He was haggling over my life. "Are you insane?" Carol shrieked. "They'll kill him. They won't kill him. Is they think they can get something," Jason said, his voice dripping with a cold, transactional logic that made me feel sick. "Dead? Hayes worth nothing to them. We have leverage." Leverage. This was Mark, his voice a low growl. "The only leverage we have is that money. Just pay the psychos and get him back." For a fleeting second, I felt a surge of warmth for Mark. He was a blunt instrument, but at least his instinct was direct. Then he continued. "Besides, the old man's worth 20 times that. What's 2 mil to get him back? It's a bargain." The warmth evaporated. A bargain. I was a transaction. David spoke again, the calm center of the storm. "Everyone, stop. Just stop. We need a plan. Jason, you're right. We can't just wire money to God knows who. This needs to be handled carefully. We need to assess the situation." "Assess what?" Carol cried. "They have my father." "I know, darling. I know," David said, his voice soothing but firm. "But think, who knew his routine? This was a targeted operation. This could be someone we know, someone close." The implication hung in the air, poisonous. They started throwing around names: disgruntled business partners, a former groundskeeper had fired, a rival from a deal 30 years ago. The conversation spiraled into paranoia and speculation. They were building narratives, but not one of them was focused solely on the sheer, terrifying fact that I was gone. Then, a new voice. Quiet, trembling, but clear. It was Maya. She must have arrived home. "Grandpa," she said. "What's happened?" The room fell silent again. Carol started to sob anew, explaining the call, the ransom. Marja's response was a knife to my heart, so pure and so full of uncomplicated fear. It made the others sound like actors. "Oh, no. Is he hurt? Did they say if he was hurt?" She wasn't thinking about the money. She was thinking about me. "They didn't say." "Sweetheart," David said, his voice gentler with her. "We have to get it," Maya said, her voice firming with a resolve that belied her years. "However much they want, we have to get it. I have my trust fund. It's not much, but it's something. It's all there. Take it." Silence. A profound, shameful silence. Her trust fund was a pittance, maybe $80,000. She was offering every penny, without hesitation, while her mother and uncle debated the financial hit and her other grandson saw me as a line item. Jason was the first to break it. "Maya, that's noble, but it's not necessary. We'll handle this. We just need to be smart." Smart. Marja's voice was laced with a fury he'd never heard from her. He could be scared. He could be hurt. "Hayes all alone. Where's your smart going to be if she couldn't finish?" I heard her break down into quiet, heartbroken sobs. That was the dividing line. In that moment, the family was split into 2 camps, clear as day. Carol, hysterical but motivated by a daughter's love, however complicated. Maya, selfless and terrified for her grandfather. On the other side, David and Jason, the calculators, already mitigating losses and planning strategies. And Mark was a wild card, motivated by what? I still wasn't sure. The maintenance of the asset, perhaps. The hours stretched. Leo fed me more updates through the speaker. The family was arguing. David was on the phone with his lawyers, his bankers, talking about emergency liquidity protocols. Jason was apparently researching hostage negotiation tactics online. Carol was pacing, a mess of nerves. Mark had gone out, saying he needed air, which probably meant he needed a drink. And Maya, my sweet Maya, she was quiet. I could barely hear her, just the occasional sniffle. She was sitting vigil. She was the only one truly waiting for me. The second call came late that night. Leo's distorted voice again, this time giving specific instructions. The money was to be gathered. They would be told where to drop it. The deadline was set for 48 hours. The reaction was immediate pandemonium. 48 hours. David, we can't possibly. Carol began. We can. David interrupted, his voice tight. We'll have to. In pulling from the money market accounts. The penalties will be brutal. I'll call my broker first thing in the morning, Jason said, though he didn't sound happy about it. I already told you, Maya said, her voice raw. Take my trust. It's not much, but it's something. Use it. That won't be necessary, Maya, David said, his tone dismissive. Well manage. He didn't want a small sacrifice muddying the financial waters. It would be an inconvenience, a reminder of a sentiment he had no room for, his spreadsheet of a crisis. I listened to it all, my heart hardening with every calculated word, breaking with every sob from Carol and Maya. The portrait was being painted in stark, brutal strokes. I saw them all now, stripped bare of their pretenses. The loving daughter, the shrewd son-in-law, the entrepreneurial grandson, the resentful grandson, and the one true heart in the entire damned family. The revenge began to form in my mind, not as a vague notion, but as a precise, surgical instrument. It would not be a blunt punishment. It would be a mirror. They would receive exactly what they had given. For David and Jason, a lesson in value. For Mark, a lesson in entitlement. For Carol, her punishment would be the most complex. And for Maya, there would be something else entirely. I sat in my dim cabin prison, a king in exile, listening to the sounds of his crumbling court. The anger was gone, burned away by the cold certainty of what I now knew. It was replaced by a grim, terrifying resolve. They had shown me who they were. Soon, it would be my turn to show them. The game was afoot, and I was no longer the pawn. I was the player. The next 36 hours were a masterclass in human nature, broadcast directly into my sterile little room. I was a ghost at my own wake, and the things I heard would haunt me far longer than any real kidnapping ever could. Sleep was impossible. The speaker in the ceiling was my lifeline to the world it left behind, and I clung to every word, every sigh, every telltale silence. The initial panic had subsided, replaced by a grim, grinding tension. The family was now a war council, and the battlefield was my fortune. David had taken command. His voice, usually a smooth, reassuring baritone at board meetings and charity galas, was now tight with a controlled stress he'd only heard once before, during the '08 crash. He was on the phone constantly, a whirlwind of financial jargon. Yes, Charles, I understand the penalty for early withdrawal, but we have a situation. No, I cannot discuss the nature of the situation. Just liquidate the position. Yes, all of it. A pause, longer. His voice dropped, becoming conspiratorial. Look, Charles, off the record, it's a unique liquidity event, a one-time capital requirement, highly sensitive, will make it worth your while to expedite. He was selling off chunks of my carefully curated portfolio, taking massive hits to appease the mysterious kidnappers. A part of me, the old businessman, winced at the inefficiency, the sheer waste of it, but another, colder part noted his phrasing, a unique liquidity event. I was an event, a line item. He wasn't doing this to save Arthur Riot, he was managing a problematic asset. Jason was his lieutenant, the tech-savvy fixer. I heard the frantic clicking of a keyboard. I'm looking into untraceable cryptocurrencies, he announced to the room at one point, his voice buzzing with a strange excitement. Monero, maybe. It's a preferred method for situations like this. We could transfer the value almost instantly, no bulky physical drop. It's smarter, We are not paying these animals in internet money. Carol's voice was shrill, frayed from crying and lack of sleep. They said cash, small, unmarked bills. If we deviate from their instructions, they'll. She couldn't finish the sentence. Mom, it's the 21st century, Jason retorted, a hint of condescension in his voice. A suitcase of cash is a movie trope. This is cleaner, more secure for us. We'd have a record of the transaction, a record of you funding terrorists. She shot back. No, absolutely not. We do it their way. We don't give them a reason to hurt him. Jason sighed, the sound heavy with exasperation at dealing with an emotional, illogical woman. I could picture him running a hand through his perfectly styled hair, convinced he was the only one thinking clearly. He wasn't trying to save me, he was trying to optimize the rescue. I was a problem to be solved with the most elegant, modern solution available. Mark was mostly silent, had come back from his air smelling of whiskey and cheap cigarettes. He contributed nothing to the planning. Instead, he paced. I could hear the heavy, impatient tread of his boots on the Persian rug. His presence was a dark, restless energy in the room. At one point, David snapped at him. For God's sake, Mark, either sit down or make yourself useful. You're making everyone nervous. The pacing stopped. Mark's voice was a low, dangerous rumble. Useful? How? You and the golden boy have got it all figured out, don't you? Liquidating Grandpa's life's work to pay off some thugs. Very useful. Do you have a better idea? Jason challenged. Yeah, Mark said. I find them and I take Grandpa back. A snort from Jason. Right. Because you're such an action hero. Be serious. I am serious, Mark growled. This is what we should be doing. Not moving decimal points around on a screen. Someone took him. Someone knows something. We should be out there, leaning on people. Not waiting by the phone like a bunch of scared sheep. It was performative anger. The kind had cultivated since he was a teenager wronged by the world. But buried beneath the bravado was a kernel of something else, a genuine, if misguided, desire for direct action. He wasn't thinking about the money. He was thinking about the insult, the violation. His grandfather had been taken, and his pride was wounded. It was about him, ultimately, but his method was at least visceral, not clinical. And then there was Maya, my anchor in the storm. She didn't pace or shout or make phone calls. She was a quiet constant. I heard her making tea for everyone. Her movements gentle and precise. I heard her trying to get Carol to eat a piece of toast. I heard her, late that first night, when the others had finally succumbed to an exhausted, fitful sleep. She was alone in the living room. The microphone picked up the soft, rhythmic sound of her breathing. Then, a whisper, so faint I had to strain to hear it. Grandpa, I don't know if you can hear me or feel this, but I'm here. We're going to get you back. Just hold on. Please hold on. She was talking to me, not to the room, not to herself, to me. The simple faith in that whisper, the love in it, was a physical ache in my chest. It was all I could do not to shout into the empty room that I was here. I was safe. It was all a terrible charade, but I stayed silent. The experiment wasn't over. The second day dawned grey. The light through my barred window a dull pewter. The mood in the living room had shifted from panic to a grim, procedural dread. The money was being assembled. David confirmed they would have the full $2 million by the afternoon. The stage was being set for the drop. It was then that the conversation turned, as I knew it eventually would, to the unthinkable. It was Jason who broached it, his voice carefully neutral, the voice of a man resenting a prudent business contingency. We need to talk about the other thing, he said. The room was quiet. What if despite our best efforts, what if this doesn't work? What do you mean? Carol asked, her voice thin. I mean, Jason said, choosing his words with loyally care. We need to be prepared for all outcomes. Dad, you've met with the estate lawyers. What's the state of Grandpa's will? I felt a cold knot tighten in my stomach. Here it was, the real prize. David cleared his throat. It's complicated. Arthur's will is a matter of record, but the most recent copy is in his safe, which he alone has the combination to. We can get a locksmith, Jason said quickly. We need to know what we're dealing with. For the family's stability. How can you be thinking about that now? Marja's voice cut through, sharp with disbelief. He's not even we're getting him back. Maya, we have to be realistic, Jason said, his tone patronizing. This is about protecting what Grandpa built. If the worst happens, there will be estate taxes, legal challenges. We need to be ready. It's not about being morbid, it's about being responsible. It was a brilliant, disgusting justification. Greed disguised as duty. Jason's right, David said, his voice weary. We need to know. For everyone's sake. I heard them troop into my study. Heard the muffled discussion as they examined the large, old safe behind my desk. Heard the eventual call to a locksmith, a discreet, high-end service David used for his clients. It took the man an hour. I sat on my cot, my hands clenched into fists, listening to the faint, metallic scraping sounds transmitted through the microphone in my study. They were breaking into my inner sanctum, rifling through my most private documents, while I was supposedly bound and gagged in some dark hole. The safe door creaked open. There was a rustle of papers. Here, David said. His voice had a strange, reverent quality. The last revision was 3 years ago. Silence as he read. I knew what it said. I had written it. The bulk of the estate, the businesses, the liquid assets, were to be placed in a trust, administered by David for a period of 5 years after my death, with distributions to Carol, Jason, and Mark. Marja's trust was separate, more generous, and immediately accessible. The house, its contents, and the sizable cash bequest were to go to Carol. Jason was to inherit my stake in his own failing tech venture, a poison chalice it intended as a final lesson. Mark was to receive a flat sum, a large one, but with a strict no-contest clause. If he challenged the will, he got nothing. It was a will designed to manage them from beyond the grave, to reward patience and punish avarice. But they didn't know that. All they heard was David summarizing the dry legal terms, the percentages, the values. The silence that followed was profound. He left me the house, Carol whispered, and her voice was thick with something relief. Already thinking about redecorating. The trust structure is complex, David said, a note of professional admiration in his voice. Very clever tax planning. My venture, Jason asked, his voice tight. He left me shares in my own company. He sounded offended, as if it insulted him. And me. Mark's voice was a low threat. A lump sum. That's it. After everything. Then, Marja's small voice. What about me? A separate trust. Sweetheart, David said, his tone softening. A very generous one. Accessible immediately. The dynamics shifted instantly. The unified front shattered. I was no longer a kidnapped patriarch, was a lottery ticket, whose numbers were being read aloud. The no-contest clause is aggressive, David mused, almost to himself. It would be very risky for anyone to challenge this. Why would we challenge it? Carol said, but her voice lacked conviction. She had the house. She was satisfied. Why would he tie up the majority of the assets for 5 years? Jason's voice was cold, analytical. That's poor capital utilization. The businesses need active management. This is sentimental nonsense. It's his will, Jason, David said, a warning in his tone. It's what he wanted. What he wanted when he wrote it 3 years ago. Jason countered. A lot can change. Maybe he had new thoughts. He was already thinking about how to undermine my final wishes. The conversation devolved into a low, tense debate about the will's provisions, its fairness, its implications. The ransom, my immediate danger, became a secondary concern, a problem they had to solve before they could get to the real business of dissecting my legacy. Maya was silent through it all. She had gotten her answer, and it meant nothing to her. Her inheritance was irrelevant. Only I was relevant. Leo entered my room silently around noon, placing a tray of food on the small table. For the first time, he spoke, his voice a low, neutral murmur. The drop is set for tonight, 10 p.m. Lone Pine Crossing. They're assembling the money now. I just nodded, my appetite gone. The audio from the living room was a cacophony of avarice and anxiety. The family was tearing itself apart. and I was the architect of its destruction. The afternoon dragged on. The money arrived in discreet, armored cases. David and Jason counted it, their voices a monotone recitation of numbers. 1,900,000, 1,950,000, 2 million. The sum was real, tangible. It sat in my living room, a monument to my value. As the hour of the drop approached, the tension reached a fever pitch. Carol was a wreck, clutching a tissue, jumping at every sound. David was pale, giving last-minute instructions to a private security operative head hired against the kidnapper's orders, a risk he was willing to take. Jason was glued to a laptop, tracking a GPS device he'd secretly hidden among the bills. Mark was staring out the window, his arms crossed, a muscle ticking in his jaw. Maya approached David. "I want to go with you," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "Absolutely not," David said. "It's too dangerous. He's my grandfather," she insisted. "I need to be there. I need to do something." "Maya, no," Carol joined in. "It's out of the question." I heard the hurt in her silence. She was being shut out, treated like a child, when she was the only one acting like an adult. At 9:30 p.m., David and the security man left with the money. The plan was for David to drive to the remote crossroads alone, leave the money, and drive away. The operative would follow at a distance, hidden, to see who picked it up. Jason would monitor the GPS from the house. The next hour was agony. The live audio was mostly silence, punctuated by Jason's updates from the GPS tracker. "He's approaching the location now. He's stopped. He's getting out. He's placing the cases. He's getting back in the car. He's driving away." A pause. Jason's voice, tense. "The cases are still there, wait. A vehicle is approaching. A truck. It's stopping. Someone's getting out. They're taking the cases, they're loading them, they're driving off. Can you see them? Can you get a plate?" Carol begged. "The operative is too far back," Jason said, frustration evident. "But I've got the GPS signal. It's moving, heading east, towards the state highway." We waited. The ransom was paid. The terms were met. Now, we waited for my release. The minutes ticked by. 5, 10, 20. Nothing. No call. No sign. "Where is he?" Carol's voice was a thin wail. "They have the money. Where is he?" "Maybe it takes time," Jason said, but he sounded uncertain. "They need to get to wherever they're holding him." An hour passed. Then 2. The GPS signal from the money suddenly went dead. Jason cursed. "They found the tracker. They've dumped it." The mood in the house plummeted from anxious hope to black despair. The worst-case scenario was now the only scenario. "They tricked us," Carol moaned. "They took the money and they're not giving him back." "We should have negotiated," Jason said, his voice bitter. "We should have used the crypto. We played it their way and we lost." "I told you," Mark suddenly roared, making everyone jump. "I told you we should have found them. Now they're gone, and Grandpa's gone, and we're out $2 million. You idiots." The arguing started again, louder, more vicious now, fueled by fear and financial loss. They had paid the price and received nothing in return. The transaction had failed. I listened to it all, my heart a stone in my chest. This was the final test. The payment was the easy part. The waiting was the hard part. This was where true character was revealed. David returned, grim-faced and empty-handed. He had nothing to report. The operative had lost the truck. It was a clean getaway. The family descended into full-blown recrimination. Carol blamed David for not handling it better. David blamed Jason for the failed tracker. Jason blamed Mark for his useless aggression. Mark blamed all of them for their weakness. And through it all, Maya was silent. Then, I heard a small, determined sound. "A zipper. What are you doing?" Carol asked, her voice thick with tears. "I'm going to look for him," Maya said. Her voice was different. All the softness was gone, replaced by a steely resolve I didn't know she possessed. "Don't be ridiculous," David said. "Where will you go?" "It's the middle of the night. I don't know," she cried, her composure breaking. "But I can't just sit here anymore. I can't listen to you all fight over money and who's to blame, while Hayes out there, scared and alone. He could be hurt. He could be. She broke down into sobs. But they were angry, frustrated sobs. I'm going. I'll drive. I'll look anywhere. I don't care. I heard her footsteps heading for the door. Heard the others trying to call her back, their voices overlapping in a chaotic mess. And in that moment, I knew. The experiment was over. I had my answers. In devastating, high-definition clarity. The calculus was complete. Carol's love was real, but panicky and easily sidelined by material concerns. David's loyalty was to the balance sheet. Jason's was to the smartest deal. Mark's was to his own bruised ego. And Marja's was absolute. It was selfless, brave, and furious. She was ready to walk into the darkness alone to find me. It was time to come home. I looked at the camera in the corner of my room and gave a single, sharp nod. Leo's voice came from a small intercom. Hadn't known was there. Understood. 15 minutes later, the phone rang in the living room. The arguing stopped dead. David answered, putting it on speaker. Hello. His voice was ragged with hope and fear. It was Leo, his voice still distorted. The deal is done. Your father is at the following coordinates. He recited a string of numbers, a location about 10 miles from the house. He's alive and unharmed. Go get him. The line went dead. For a second, there was stunned silence. Then, chaos erupted again. But this time, it was a chaotic joy. Carol was sobbing with relief. David was already grabbing his keys, shouting the coordinates to Jason to put into GPS. One didn't hear the rest. Leo entered my room. He held out his hand. And it was the tranquilizer dart. A final touch, for authenticity, he said. You should be groggy, disoriented. They'll expect it. I didn't hesitate. I nodded, rolled up my sleeve, and turned my head. The sharp sting was just as before, and the world once again dissolved into nothingness. I woke up to the sound of car doors slamming and voices shouting my name. I was lying on a bed of pine needles at the edge of a dirt road, the cold night air biting through my jacket. A blanket had been thrown over me. My head throbbed, my mouth was dry as dust, and every muscle ached. The disorientation was real this time, and I leaned into it, letting my eyes flutter open weakly. A flashlight beam hit my face, making me wince. Hayes here. Oh my God, Dad. Dad. It was Carol. She fell to her knees beside me, her hands fluttering over my face, my arms as if checking I was all in one piece. She was crying uncontrollably. David was right behind her, his face ashen with relief. Arthur, can you hear me? Are you hurt? I tried to speak, but only a dry croak came out. I shook my head weakly. Then I saw Maya. She was standing back from the others, her face pale in the moonlight, streaked with tears. Her hands were clenched into fists at her sides. She was just staring at me, her chest heaving. She had been ready to burn the world down to find me, and now she was frozen, the adrenaline crashing. Jason and Mark were there too, hovering at the edges, their faces a mix of relief and other, more complicated emotions. They helped me into the car, wrapping me in blankets. Carol held my hand the entire way home, babbling about how scared they were, how they got the money, how everything was going to be all right now. David kept asking if I remembered anything, if I saw their faces, how many there were. I played my part perfectly. I was confused, exhausted, traumatized. I mumbled about a dark room, about a masked man who never spoke, about hearing nothing but silence. It was all a blur, a nightmare. I clung to the story with the desperation of a man who had truly lived it. The homecoming was surreal. The house I had left 2 days ago was the same, but I was not. They were not. I saw the looks they exchanged when they thought I wasn't looking. The relief was already giving way to the aftermath. The 2 million was gone. I was back. The balance of power had been reset, but the ground had been irrevocably shaken. A doctor was called, a discreet family friend. He examined me, pronounced me dehydrated and in shock, but physically fine. He prescribed rest, lots of rest. They put me to bed in my own room. Carol fussed over the blankets. David brought me a glass of water. Jason stood in the doorway, offering a weak smile. Mark gave a stiff nod from the hall. Maya was the last to come in. She sat on the edge of my bed, her hand finding mine. It was ice cold. I was so scared, Grandpa, she whispered, her voice raw. I squeezed her hand, the gesture costing me every ounce of my strength. I'm here, sweetheart, I rasped. I'm here because of you. It was the first true thing he'd said since my return. She looked at me, her eyes searching mine, and for a terrifying second, I thought she saw through it all, saw the deception, the cold, calculated experiment. But she just saw her exhausted, traumatized grandfather. She leaned down and kissed my forehead. Get some sleep, she said. We'll talk tomorrow. She turned off the light and left me alone in the darkness. I lay there in my luxurious bed, in my silent, safe house, and I listened. I listened to the sounds of the family downstairs. The initial euphoria had faded. Their voices were lower now, more serious. I heard David on the phone with his banker again. Need to start the recovery process, yes. The funds were taken, well, need to file insurance claims. See what can be salvaged, I heard Jason. His voice animated. A learning experience. A brutal one. But we can tighten security. You look into that cryptocurrency hedge. Was talking about, I heard Mark. Talking to someone on his phone. His voice a low boast. Yeah. It was intense, whole family was falling apart. But I kept a level head. Grandpa's tough. He'll be fine, and I heard Carol, her voice breaking. My father. David, what he must have gone through, we have to make it up to him. We have to be better. The performance was over. The audience had gone home, and the actors were already slipping back into their old roles. The trauma just a new layer of paint on the same rotten wood. But I had heard their truth. I had seen their naked souls in the crucible of that crisis. And as I lay there in the dark, the blueprint for my revenge, tailored to each of them, began to finalize itself in my mind. It was no longer about anger. It was about justice. Poetic, devastating, and perfectly personal justice. The grandfather they knew was gone. In his place was something harder, colder, and infinitely more dangerous. The kidnapping was over. The reckoning was about to begin. The silence of my recovery was a lie. A thick, expensive lie. Like the silk sheets they'd tucked me into. For 2 days, I played the shell-shocked victim. I took the sedatives the doctor offered and flushed them down the toilet when no one was looking. I picked at the meals Carol brought on a tray, my appetite truly gone, but for reasons they couldn't fathom. I'd stare out the window of my bedroom, not at the manicured lawns, but into the recent, ugly past, replaying every damning word they'd uttered. They tiptoed around me, their concern a mask I could now see right through. Carol's was layered with a new, proprietary guilt. She'd gotten her father back, and it solidified her position as the grieving, devoted daughter. She'd earned her place in the narrative. David's concern was professional, logistical. He was already working on the post-incident recovery, which meant figuring out how to recoup the financial loss through insurance and tax write-offs. My trauma was a line item on a spreadsheet titled Kidnapping Event, Q4. Jason tried to bond with me over the security failures, his mind already spinning the event into a business opportunity. We need a panic button system, Pops, he'd say, sitting on the edge of an armchair. GPS implants are a thing now, you know, very discreet. This'll be a great case study for my new venture capital firm, crisis management tech for high net worth individuals. He wasn't seeing his grandfather, he was seeing a proof of concept. Mark just avoided me. When we were in the same room, his gaze would skitter away from mine, heavy with a shame I couldn't quite decipher. Was it shame that he hadn't done more, or shame that, in his heart, had been okay with the idea of my demise evening the score? And Maya was different. She was quiet, watchful. The fiery determination that had sent her charging out into the night had banked to a steady, simmering coal of protectiveness. She'd sit with me 4 hours, not speaking, just reading a book or working on her laptop, a silent sentinel. She was the only one whose presence didn't feel like a performance. She was the only one who seemed to understand that the man who had returned was not the same man who had left. She just didn't know why. On the third day, I decided it was time to stop resting and start working. I summoned them all to my study. The same study they'd broken into. The safe door was still slightly ajar, a silent accusation. They filed in, their faces a gallery of expectant concern. Carol, wringing her hands. David, poised with a legal pad. Jason, buzzing with unsolicited advice. Mark, slouching against the doorframe, trying to look bored. Maya took a seat in the corner, her eyes fixed on me. I didn't sit behind the desk. I stood before the cold fireplace, leaning on my cane, playing up the frailty they expected to see. I want to thank you all, I began, my voice raspy, carefully modulated, for what you did, for getting me back. Carol immediately burst into tears. Oh, Dad, of course. We were so worried. It was a team effort, Arthur. David said smoothly. We just had to stay calm and work the problem. The problem, I repeated softly, letting the word hang in the air. I looked at each of them in turn, meeting their eyes. Jason's were bright and eager. Mark's were shuttered. David's were professionally sincere. Carol's were swimming in tears. Marja's were just waiting. The $2 million, I said. That was a significant sum. Liquidated so quickly. It must have been difficult. Nothing was more important than your safety, Dad, Carol said. The line delivered with practiced ease. We took a hit, certainly, David admitted, with a businessman's rueful shrug, but the portfolio will recover. The main thing is your home. I said, and am deeply aware of the cost, not just the financial cost. I paused, letting the implications sink in. I've been doing a lot of thinking in here, about the future, about this family. They were all leaning forward now, except for Maya. This was what they wanted to hear. The post-crisis reckoning, the redistribution of the spoils, the reward for their good behavior. I've decided, I said, my voice gaining a sliver of strength, that some changes need to be made. Immediate changes. David nodded gravely. Whatever you need, Arthur. We're here to support you. The first change concerns you, David, I said. He blinked, surprised to be called out first. The stress of managing my primary holdings, it's too much. For you and for Carol. I don't want that burden on you anymore. A flicker of alarm crossed his face before he could mask it. Arthur, it's no burden. I'm happy to. I've instructed my lawyers to dissolve the trust management structure outlined in my will, I continued, as if he hadn't spoken. Effective immediately. The assets will be moved to a new, blind trust managed by a firm in Zurich, completely hands-off. You'll be free of the responsibility. The color drained from his face. This was a demotion of seismic proportions. He was being fired from the family business. The control head counted on, the power head wielded, as the administrator of my fortune, was evaporating. His support was no longer required. His lips moved, but no sound came out. He looked like a man who had just been told the oxygen on the spaceship was running out. Dad, are you sure? Carol asked, her voice tight. This affected her, too. Her future security was tied to David's management. I've never been more sure, I said, my tone leaving no room for argument. I turned to Jason. Jason, my grandson, so eager to innovate. Jason perked up, a hopeful smile on his face. He was next. Surely his loyalty was to be rewarded. Your new venture capital firm, I said. The one focused on crisis management. It sounds timely. Yes, Pops. It's the future, he said, leaning forward. I agree, which is why I'm investing. I let him have a moment of pure, unadulterated triumph. He shot a look at David. A look that said, see, the old man gets it. I'm investing $2 million, I said. The triumph on his face froze, then slowly cracked. $2 million. The exact sum of the ransom. The room went dead quiet. The ransom money. Jason whispered, his face pale. Oh, no, I said, my voice gentle, cruel. That money is gone. This is a separate investment, from my personal funds. Consider it a vote of confidence in your transactional skills. The message was delivered with the precision of a scalpel. I was giving him exactly what had valued me at. $2 million. A business transaction. his dream funding, now forever tainted, a monument to his own cold calculation. He looked like he'd been slapped. The wind was utterly knocked out of his sails. "Mark," I said. My voice hardened. He stiffened, pushing himself off the door frame. "You wanted action. You wanted to lean on people. You thought the solution was force." He said nothing, just glared at me, his jaw clenched. "A man of action shouldn't be stifled by family obligations," I said. "He should be out in the world, making his own way, proving his worth on his own terms." I reached into my pocket and pulled out a single, folded check. I held it out to him. "This is your inheritance. The full lump sum from the will. Yours now. No strings, no waiting." He stared at the check as if it were a snake. It was everything he'd ever complained about not having, but it wasn't being given as a reward, it was being given as a dismissal, a payoff. "Take the money and get out." He didn't move. "Take it," I said, my voice flat. "Prove you're the man you say you are, without my name, without my roof. Go be a success, or a failure, but it will be yours." Slowly, hatred burning in his eyes, he stepped forward and snatched the check from my hand. He didn't look at the amount. He just crumpled it in his fist, turned, and walked out of the study, out of the house, and, I suspected, out of our lives for good. His revenge for a lifetime of perceived slights was a suitcase full of cash, and the door slammed shut behind him. The room was stunned. Carol was crying in earnest now, confused and frightened. David looked like he'd been physically assaulted. Jason was staring at the floor, his dream now a nightmare. I saved Carol for last. This was the most delicate cut. "Carol, my dear," I said, my voice softening into a parody of paternal warmth. She looked up, her eyes red-rimmed and hopeful. Surely, after all this, she would be comforted. "This ordeal has shown me how much you love this house," I said, gesturing around the study. "How much it means to you. The parties, the social standing, the china patterns." She nodded, a tentative smile touching her lips. "And the thought of you worrying about it, about maintaining it after I'm gone, it's an unfair burden. I see that now." "Oh, Dad, it's not a burden. It's a privilege," she started. "Which is why in giving it to you," I interrupted. "Now, the house, the contents, everything, it's yours. Today." Her hand flew to her mouth. It was what she'd always wanted, the crown jewel. But the delivery was all wrong. The context was all wrong. But where will you go?" she stammered. "Oh, I'm keeping the New York apartment," I said airily. "And I've bought a small place near Marja's university. I need a change of scenery, somewhere quiet. This big old house needs a family, laughter. It needs you." I was giving her exactly what she'd coveted, but I was stripping it of all its power. She wasn't inheriting it. She was being put in charge of it, like a curator of a museum. And I was moving away. I was leaving her. The house was hers, but the patriarch was abdicating. Her victory felt hollow and terrifying. She was being given the shell, while I took the essence away with me. Finally, I turned to Maya. The others were too deep in their own personal shocks to even notice. She was still sitting in the corner, her expression unreadable. "Maya," I said, and for the first time, my voice held no artifice, no calculation, just a profound and weary truth. "You offered everything you had. You were ready to give it all up for me." She just looked at me, her eyes deep and knowing. "I don't want your money," I said. "I don't want to give you things. I have something else for you." I walked to my desk, unlocked a drawer they hadn't found, and pulled out a simple, old key on a leather cord. I walked over to her and placed it in her hand, closing her fingers around it. "It's the key to a safety deposit box," I said, my voice low, "for her alone, in a bank in Zurich, the same city that will be managing the New Blind Trust. Inside are documents, instructions, the names of the lawyers who work for me, and me alone. The rest of my life, the parts that truly matter, are in that box. You are the only one who knows it exists. You are the only one with a key." I was making her my heir, not of money, but of power, of truth. She would be the silent guardian of the family's real future, The one person who could hold the others accountable long after I was gone. I was giving her not wealth, but responsibility, and my absolute, unwavering trust. Her fingers closed around the key. A single tear escaped and traced a path down her cheek. But she didn't cry. She just nodded, a deep, understanding passing between us that needed no words. She knew, maybe not all of it, but enough. She knew the game had been played, and she alone had passed. The aftermath was a quiet explosion. David and Carol left the study in a daze, their worldview shattered. Jason followed soon after, the $2 million check in his hand, feeling like a lead weight. The house felt different, emptier, but also cleaner, as if a fever had broken. I moved out within the week. The New York apartment was a sterile, modern place I never liked. The cottage near Major's University was small, cozy, and overlooked the sea. I told everyone I needed the peace, the quiet to recover. The truth was, I needed to be near the one person who made me feel human. The repercussions of that day in the study rippled outwards, exactly as I'd intended. David, stripped of his purpose, became a ghost in his own life. He tried to get involved in other ventures, but his heart wasn't in it. The thrill of managing the riot fortune was gone. He and Carol lived in the big house, but it felt like a gilded cage. They rattled around in it, their conversations hollow, their marriage showing the cracks that had always been there, now papered over with nothing but expensive silence. Jason launched his firm. The $2 million was a start, but it was a cursed start. The story of how he got it, the ransom sum, my chillingly specific vote of confidence leaked out, as I knew it would. It became a dark joke in the venture capital world. Who would want to do business with a man whose grandfather had so publicly priced his own life? His firm floundered, a constant, humiliating reminder that some things aren't transactional. Mark blew through the money in under a year. He bought fast cars, bad friends, and fleeting respect. The money didn't solve his anger, it just gave him a bigger platform to express it. He ended up broke, bitter, and alone, living in a rented room somewhere in Nevada, still blaming me for his downfall. He'd gotten exactly what he'd asked for, a chance to prove himself without me, and had proved himself a failure. And Carol, my daughter, she got her palace. She threw parties, but they were strained, sad affairs. The socialites came, but they came to see the spectacle, the woman who had been given the kingdom only after the king had abandoned it. She became a curator of a dead empire, dusting the portraits of a family that had fractured under her roof. Her punishment was getting everything she ever wanted. Only Maya thrived. She finished her degree with a quiet ferocity. She would visit me at the cottage, and we would walk along the shore. We never spoke explicitly about what I had done. We didn't need to. She understood the terrible calculus of it. She understood the love that had curdled into something fierce and protective and vengeful. She used the key once, a year after I moved. She came to me, her face serious. "Grandfather," she said. She never called me Grandpa anymore, a subtle shift I appreciated. "There's an issue with the trust. David is challenging the fees the Swiss firm is charging. He's claiming they're exorbitant." I just smiled. "And what do you think?" "I think he's bored and trying to reassert control," she said, her voice cool. "I think he needs to be reminded of the new reality." "Then remind him," I said. She did. She flew to Zurich, met with the lawyers, and laid out the facts with a clarity and authority that left no room for argument. She was 22 years old, and she held the strings of a multi-million-dollar empire in her hands. She never raised her voice. She never made a threat. She simply stated the terms of the agreement David had already accepted. He backed down immediately, humiliated and terrified of this quiet, powerful young woman who had somehow emerged from the wreckage. I knew then that I had made the right choice. The future was safe. I lived another 10 years in that cottage by the sea. They were good years, quiet years. The ghosts of my actions were always with me, but I had made my peace with them. I had chosen justice over harmony, truth over comfort. I had burned down the village to save it. The family gatherings were awkward, sparse affairs. Christmas, a few birthdays. The money was still there, flowing through the channels it designed, but the heart of the family was gone. It had died in those 2 days, murdered by my own hand. What was left was a functional, bloodless entity, a well-managed trust. I died on a Tuesday morning, watching the sun rise over the water. Maya was there, holding my hand. She was the only one I told. She was the only one I wanted there. After my funeral, a small, private affair that David and Carol turned into a grotesque, showy spectacle despite my wishes, Maya gathered them all one last time. In my New York apartment, the one I'd never liked. She waited until the lawyer had read the simple, final will, leaving my personal effects and the remainder of my liquid assets to her, as they all knew he would. Then, when the formalities were over, she stood up. She was no longer a girl. She was a woman, poised, assured, and in possession of a terrible secret. "There's one more thing," she said, her voice filling the room. She looked at David, at Carol, at Jason. Mark wasn't there. Had died the year before in a drunk driving accident. A sad, lonely end. "Grandfather left a letter," she said, "to be read after the will was executed." She didn't pull out a letter. She simply began to speak, reciting it from memory, her eyes holding theirs captive. "You were probably wondering why I did what I did," she began, my words in her mouth. "Why I dismantled the family. Why I punished you all so specifically. The answer is simple. I knew." A frozen silence. I knew everything. I heard every word. From the moment the ransom call ended to the moment you were told where to find me. I heard David worrying about the financial hit. I heard Jason suggest negotiating down the price of my life. I heard Mark call me a bargain. I heard Carol claim the house. Carol made a small, choke sound. I heard you break into my safe and dissect my will while I was, as you believed, facing death. I heard your greed, your calculation, your fear. And I heard one voice, only one, offer everything she had without hesitation, worrying only for my safety, not for the cost. She looked at each of them, her gaze unforgiving. So, I tailored my response. I gave each of you exactly what you demonstrated you valued most. David, you valued control of the money, so I took it away. Jason, you valued a smart transaction, so I made you one. Mark, you valued a payout and your own pride, so I gave you both and set you adrift. Carol, you valued the symbol of our wealth, so I gave you the empty symbol and took myself away from it. She paused, letting the horror of it sink in. The scale of the deception, the depth of my betrayal, their own words, come back to haunt them a decade later. "You were not punished by a crazy old man," she said, her voice final. "You were judged by the choices you made when you thought no one was listening. You sentenced yourselves." She didn't say another word. She simply turned, walked out of the apartment, and left them there, trapped forever in the gilded cage of their own making, finally hearing the truth they had spoken so freely in what they thought was the safety of the dark. The grandfather was gone. The riot was over. All that was left was the silence.